The Labour leader's big speech was heralded as crunch time for the Prime Minister, putting the government on the spot by creating a clear policy division which could reach a critical vote in Parliament. We'll be looking at whether it lived up to that promise. Jeremy Corbyn gave his speech in Coventry, a strong Labour area which voted heavily for Brexit. He said such places are those which have lost out the most, where people feel the system is rigged against them.
Labour is looking for a Brexit that puts the working people first. Leaving the EU, whatever that exit date comes, risks delivering a shock to the EU economy unless the right plans and protections are in place to allow the kind of investment and economic transformation programme that the country needs and that Labour is committed to.
He said Labour wouldn't abandon EU agencies like Euratom for reasons of phony jingoistic posturing. Then the heart of Labour's gradual policy change, a call for a bespoke, negotiated new relationship for the UK.
We've long argued that a customs union is a viable option for the final deal. So Labour would seek to negotiate a new, comprehensive UK-EU customs union to ensure there are no tariffs with Europe and to help avoid any need whatsoever for a hard border in Northern Ireland. But we're also clear that the option of a new UK customs union with the EU would need to ensure that the UK has a say in future trade deals. A new customs arrangement would depend on Britain being able to negotiate agreement for new trade deals in our national interest. Labour would not countenance a deal that left Britain as a passive recipient of rules decided elsewhere by others that would mean ending up as a mere rule taker.
He appealed to MPs of all parties to support this new policy rather than what he called an ideological fantasy of downgrading trading links with Europe in favour of deals around the world. He went on to say that it was alarming that after the referendum there was a rise in xenophobic and racist attacks.
Our immigration system will change and freedom of movement will, as a statement of fact, end when we leave the EU. But we have also said that in the trade negotiations, our priorities are growth, jobs and people's living standards. We make no apologies for putting those aims before bogus immigration targets. Labour will design our immigration policy around the needs of the economy based on fair rules and the reasonable management of migration.
Mr Corbyn did acknowledge his past. He's long been a Eurosceptic, but said scepticism was healthy. He was opposed to the free market orthodoxy and democratic deficit of the EU, but he wasn't anti-European. He argued that while some would say Brexit would create a land of milk and honey, others that it would be a disaster, the truth was more down to earth.
Labour is the party of the new common sense on the economy, on public services and on Brexit. The only party which recognises the world has changed these last 10 years. And no, we cannot continue with widening inequality, deregulation of industry and privatisation of public services. We're in a country where Tory-run councils are collapsing because of cuts, where homeless people are dying on the streets in the shadow of Parliament, where good jobs are being lost because we've got a government that will not get a grip on the casino economy. In or out of the European Union, we have to deal with that reality, the reality of market failure and of austerity.
So what should we make of the core policy at the heart of the Labour leader's speech? Chris Morris, our Brexit expert, is here in the studio. Chris, can you explain, first of all, what a customs union is and what Jeremy Corbyn is proposing that's different to what we've got now?
Sure. I mean, a customs union is actually it's a technical term in the world of trade talks, and it means that everyone involved has the same external tariffs on imports coming in from outside that group of countries, in effect the same tax on goods which are brought across that external border. It is a customs union they're asking for rather than the customs union, because the customs union comprises the member states of the European Union, plus, for complicated reasons we don't need to get into, Monaco. But there are other customs unions. Turkey has a customs union with the EU. Now, a lot of people criticise that and say Turkey doesn't have a particularly good deal. I think Labour's argument would be, and obviously, again, this would have to be negotiated with the EU, is that we could get our own bespoke customs union, which would be better than Turkey's one because we are a more significant economy and therefore have more to offer for the EU. But again, I think it's really worth stressing, just like with the government, these are proposals which a political party in the UK has now coalesced around. All of it, whoever's in government, still has to be negotiated with 27 other countries.
And what's different? I mean, the Downing Street have repeated again that they don't want a customs union. So how different is this?
Yeah, I mean, the government talks broadly about some sort of customs arrangement, which isn't a sort of, that can mean almost whatever you like it to mean. I think one of the big differences, obviously, is that government is stressing by leaving the customs union or a customs and not being part of a customs union, the United Kingdom has the ability to do its own trade deals around the world. Now, what Mr. Corbyn said was that he still wants the United Kingdom to have influence on those deals. But what he appeared to be saying, and he wasn't specific about this, but he appeared to be saying, we want alongside the EU to have a role in negotiating any future trade deal with third countries. He wasn't asking for, and this is again, I think, is a clear departure from the government's policy, for the UK to have the ability to do separate trade deals of its own.
Because in a customs union, you can't wander off and just make another deal with another country.
You can't, because you have the same external tariff. And if you start making a different deal with slightly different tariff arrangements, then that all breaks down.
And does it have any implications at all for immigration?
The argument about the customs union in itself, no, because immigration is really it's a single market issue. The famous four freedoms that get talked about, the free movement of goods, services, capital and people. And it's in the single market that you enshrine the free movement of people. But as you heard, one of the clips you played from Mr. Corbyn, he did talk about immigration a lot. And he really, I think, went pretty hard on the idea that we're not going to have the rigid red lines on immigration that he would argue that the government has, and that Labour's policy, and I think this is something designed, to appeal to many of its core supporters, it's to say, look, we're going to look after jobs and growth in the economy before what he called bogus targets on immigration. So I think he realises that immigration is a big part of this debate, but he's trying to say the economy should come first.
So all in all, what did you make of it?
Both major parties, it seems to me, are still pretty divided internally about what they really want. And they're both still, in a sense, that you both have leaders in a way sort of sitting on fences and trying to straddle these broad streams of opinion. It's probably not that surprising, because Brexit is such a vast change for this country that it would be almost impossible for any political party of any size to coalesce around one single strand of opinion. I think what he has done is put clear water now between Labour and government policy. Whether it's going to be enough to convince people that he's actually on a better track than the government, that's a different matter.
So Keir Starmer is Labour's Shadow Secretary of State for leaving the EU, and he joins us now from Coventry, where Jeremy Corbyn made that speech. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Isn't the customs union a very basic, the foundational part of the what was the common market, the European Union? So not leaving it isn't exactly taking back control.
Well, the referendum was to leave the EU, and we will leave the EU in March 2019. We now have to make choices about the future, and Labour has been very clear that jobs and the economy have got to be the priority, and having a customs union with the EU preserves tariff-free trade with Europe, but also is the only realistic answer to the question of how do you avoid a hard border in Northern Ireland. So we will
but in the
leave
process,
the EU,
does it
but we have obligations.
Does it betray those Labour voters, or indeed any other voters who voted for Brexit?
No, I think what people did, whether they voted to stay or to leave, they want our economy to be strong. They like the jobs and economy-based approach that Labour has taken. Jeremy Corbyn had a lot to say this morning about investing across the country in our businesses, in our industrial sector. But this is about choices for the future which preserve the economy and preserve jobs. And I think people are now expecting the government and us, the opposition, to set out in clearer detail how we would achieve what we need to achieve for the next 20 or 30 years.
Let's look at some of that detail. He said a new customs arrangement would depend on Britain being able to negotiate agreement of new trade deals in our national interest. On our own, outside the EU?
Now, what Jeremy Corbyn was saying there is that we'd have a far better chance of new trade agreements, which we all want. They're a good thing. If we, as it were, pool our resources with the EU and do it jointly, but we must have a say in that.
So no change. We've got to say now, haven't we, of course?
We've got to say, yes, but it's an important thing for us, obviously, to negotiate going forward, because we will no longer be an EU.
So we're not taking back control of that?
How we do that is important. But I think it is, I mean, for anybody who is criticising this move today, I think it's very important for them to answer the question, which is, how would you propose that there is no hard border in Northern Ireland unless you have a customs union? Because I haven't heard anybody credible answer that question, other than you've got to have a customs union.
But there are other points as well, aren't there? I mean, Graham Stringer, who called it motherhood and apple pie, was suggesting that people will be paying higher tariffs, higher food prices than if we left.
No, the contrary is true, and as everybody who's seen or even seen the leaked versions of the government impact assessments knows, that the cost of leaving a customs union is very high, and that will be impacted on everybody across the country. So this is a position which actually is in the interest of our economy and our jobs.
Is there any indication at all that the European Union would buy what you're suggesting?
Well, we've been discussing matters with the EU itself, with EU 27 countries. I've had a lot of discussion with them. Obviously, this is subject to negotiation, but what they've been wanting for some time, and they've not been getting from the government, is an answer to the question, do you basically want to stay close and have a discussion about how that is achieved economically, or do you want to be distant, rip yourself out, deregulate, and that's a very different discussion. Labour's now answered that question. Obviously, there's now a discussion to be had, but we know what it is we're trying to achieve.
And is it really...
The government hasn't answered that basic question.
You said,
wait till Friday.
You said yesterday that this was crunch time for the Prime Minister. Do you really think
Yes.
it is?
Well, it is, because she has had this dilemma at the heart of her cabinet ever since the referendum, where she's split between those that want to stay close economically to the EU and those that want to be very distant and rip us away and deregulate. She's still not resolved that. We're very clear today about our vision and staying close. I think there's a majority across Parliament for that view. If a customs union were put to a vote, I think a majority would favour the approach that we've set out this morning rather than the Prime Minister's. The Prime Minister now needs to respond. The ball is very much in her court.
Well, we'll see you on Friday, Sir Keir Starmer. Thank you very much.